Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Air Force's Global Classroom. My name is Michaela McCurry, and I work with the outreach team here at the Air Force Culture and Language Center. On today's episode of AFCLC TV, we'll go behind the scenes of the recent ZOV document translation to discuss the process and the impact of this project from the leadership and organizational perspective. When an open source document emerged on the social media account of a Russian parachutist detailing information on the Ukraine conflict that would be crucial for educating airmen, Air University's Office of Sponsored Programs called on 5 Russian-speaking scholars in the Air Force Culture and Language Center's Language-Enabled Airmen program to translate the memoir. So joining us today, we have Dr. Margaret Sankey and Mr. Steve Gunter, who were 2 leaders who played a key role in facilitating this translation project. Dr. Sankey is the research coordinator for Air University's Office of Sponsored Programs, and Mr. Gunter serves as a language development coordinator here at the AFCLC. Dr. Sankey and Mr. Gunter, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Dr. Sankey, can you start by telling us a little bit about your role as a research coordinator and what was your process for finding research activities like the ZOV memoir?
Well, one of the best parts of my job is figuring out what students and faculty at Air University are doing, and then making sure not only that their projects get in front of the right people to act on them, but making sure that they have the resources that they need in order to do the best job. And so whether this is the right database at the library, the right expert to call upon, the kind of hardware that they need. And so obviously, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is one of the biggest things to come around in a long time. This is of immediate application in all of the classes we teach, whether it's operations or planning or intelligence or regional security. And so from the outset, I've been thinking, how can we best enable our scholars to look at this, to apply the brain power that they bring to Air University into things that the DoD, the DAF can use. And unfortunately, while I absolutely trust that the intelligence community has got a handle on this, what we need are open source available documents. Who has the expertise that we can actually make available to people without endangering anybody, without stepping on any of the classification issues that we have, absolutely for good reasons. So earlier, my office had done things like we found a young Auburn alumni, an early career journalist who was in Ukraine during the opening months of the invasion. We brought him to do a talk. He has his pictures and his firsthand experience. That recorded talk is at the AU Library, Colin Mayfield. It's a terrific source. And so when we were thinking, how do we get hold of this? I kept digging around and I kept seeing last fall, around October and November, I kept seeing references in the international press, French and German newspapers, to the social media kind of dump of a Russian officer, somebody who had firsthand knowledge. And so it took a little bit of pulling on threads. None of the international papers had the whole document. They like to quote from it, but nobody had the whole thing. And so I finally tracked this back to where it was just being unloaded on Russian social media. And I was really surprised at the frankness and that it was still there when I went and was copying and pasting. So I copied and pasted 140 pages, which is tedious and a lot. I checked it against some other folks who had done the same thing. But what became really apparent to me was that my old school 80s Cold War Russian was not up to this. I knew the content was really good stuff. But I am not up on 21st century Russian slang, and I am in no way competent to look at Russian military vocabulary. But the really good news is I knew exactly who to call.
That's awesome. So what is the strategic importance of having this memoir and similar documents translated by members of the Language-Enabled Airmen program?
Well, we really need to know what's going on both sides.
Mhm.
Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has done an incredible, brilliant job at telling their truth. I mean, they are masters of social media, getting a narrative out there, whether it's people in the field or people on the urban home front. But this was really missing from the Russian side, both because they had really tight controls, but also because it's just not, they're not making it accessible. What you're getting is just Russian state media, which in many ways is useful in its own way, but it's not what students really needed from what was going on the ground. And so what comes out of this is a really visceral, literal boots on the ground kind of account of this. And it turns out the author of this, of course, left the Russian military and has been in Western Europe. And there were plans to publish this commercially. It was supposed to appear later this fall, which is, a long time to wait for something. But also, he seems to be kind of a difficult personality, got into it with his publishers, and that's been canceled. So what the result is that this is the only accessible translated version of this in English that's available. And it's really amazing that it can just be as easy as clicking and going to the MISFRIC and seeing it.
Wow. So, Mr. Gunner, once the request came into AFCLC, you came and kind of took the reins in facilitating the request. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as a language development coordinator and your process for facilitating this type of request?
Sure. So the very first thing that someone would need to do before to access the TPR role is to email us at the afclc.leap.admin@us.af.mil. At that point, we get the basic version of what the sponsor is needing as far as what language, whether it's a travel TPR or a translation TPR, how many people are possibly expected to be needed. In this case, as Dr. Sankey said, we had 5 volunteers that were recruited, and I could go into that a little bit later. Each of them had about 28 pages to translate, and then I had one overall person to compile all the information, make sure that the document sort of read as one document instead of 5 different people translating the document in sort of their own verbiage, just like just like an accent or something like that. So, but the first thing to do is contact us through a webpage. At that point, we get the TPR, goes into our system, and then from there we can start looking at other options as far as recruitment and different aspects of that TPR.
Okay. So we know that the training partnership request method that you mentioned will soon be formally identified in a Department of the Air Force instruction. So how can commands and organizations request that support directly through AFCLC? I know you mentioned they can email us, and then we also have that request form on our website as well. And what kind of missions can they request LEAP scholars for?
So the missions themselves are, again, travel-based or TPR-based, comes from all of the branches of service. As long as they can email us and we can support that particular language and the number of people within our pipeline that we have available to us, it's as simple as reaching out. So our criteria, not to get ahead on your questions, but our criteria is usually a 2+2+ DLPT scores, somewhere along the 11 or 12 E-mentor scores. At that point, that they've done enough to at least be able to show us that they are fluent within the language, able to listen, able to read, able to speak it. And at that point, I send out a mass email recruiting that particular language, whatever language is being requested. At that point, I start receiving volunteers back in to the AFCLC org box. At that point, depending on the rank structure that is needed, sometimes if it's an enlisted type TPR, it's only enlisted people. If it's an overall TPR, then it could be a combination. If they're wanting someone from the officer ranks but no higher than a major or lieutenant colonel, they have that option. All they have to do is let us know the parameters of their TPR that they want to know. And then once we receive it, I start recruiting. Once the volunteers come in, I re-look at the volunteer list, make sure they're compatible to the TPR. At that point, we send, they have to have, of course, commander's approval. At that point, it's just the sponsor paying for we get them a LOA, line of accounting, and get them to their functional location. If it's a travel TPR, if it's just translation, then I hand out assignments. Again, just like the ZOV, we had 5 people, 28 pages, split it up, try to get as equal as possible, and then give them a due date, and comes back, and then I give it back to the sponsor.
Awesome. So they can request either for virtual or translation projects, and also missions on the ground.
Yes. Yeah, sure can.
Awesome. Well, that's a great tool that people have access to. Any organization or DoD department organization has access to get those LEAP scholars to help in those missions. So that's a great asset to have.
Yeah.
So Dr. Sankey, you mentioned that this project is one of the very few public translations available, and the only one that military members have translated. So it's an open source for anybody to use. How has the translation been utilized so far?
Well, when I first got it back, and I was amazed at the speed at which this happened. I put in the request and I thought, oh, we'll wait. Oh no, this arrived not only in a highly polished translation, but in a form that's really attractive. It's easy to use. There's a military glossary attached to it. And so I hand walked this to all of the people at AU that I knew were working in this space. Our Russia Research Task Force, which is a UCOM sponsored program. I know they immediately not only were using it in their seminar, but handed it back to the Russia Strategic Initiative in UCOM. Our folks at the Air War College who were teaching, the expeditionary air power, our regional studies folks who were preparing to go to that region, whether the Baltics or Hungary and Poland. And so this was being read right away. The circulation kind of caught me by surprise. I'm old, I don't understand how things go viral, but I started seeing references to this in military times, in Stars and Stripes, and I'm just really thrilled that this is something that we can put out there, that it's an asset and a resource that doesn't cost readers anything, that's available without a paywall, because I think having this glimpse into what's going on, how our adversaries are thinking and feeling, and what their morale is like, is a really incredible tool to personalize, to humanize, to get a sense of what's going on. And well, I have not triangulated the veracity of everything this guy says. It's something that is really precious. And so having the ability to inject this into our curriculum in a way that's this available is really amazing.
Wow. That's awesome that so many people have been able to utilize it in the Air University space, and also that it's open to the public so anybody can access it through the Air University Library. All right, so before we take questions from our audience, is there anything else either of you would like to add?
I would like to thank Dr. Sankey just for giving us the opportunity to translate this document. I've personally read the document and found it extremely interesting, and something I wouldn't have known unless I was actually involved in this document. So Dr. Sankey, thank you for showing me something that I didn't know before. So.
Well, I have to thank the LEAP program. This is the very first time I've asked for help with a document, and of course been tremendously impressed. I do have a couple of years of experience, though, where LEAP has supported me on the ground. When I do regional studies trips, we have requested and always received outstanding personnel to accompany us on really high-level engagements, whether they were Italian or Greek speakers, most recently Tagalog and Hindi. And these are just really dynamic folks who not only make sure that we're communicating, but that we really understand our partners and allies, that we build a relationship. And so I certainly will be asking for more translation help down the line, but I'm really looking forward to next year when we go to the Philippines and Thailand, and how much they add to our experience.
That's awesome. We're glad that you have found so much utilization with our LEAP scholars to help you on different missions and also in translation projects now. So that's great. All right, so now we'll take some questions from our audience, either on Zoom or on Facebook. So our first question, how many LEAP scholars ended up supporting this document translation?
So I recruited probably 15 volunteers and ended up with 5 that ended up with about 28 pages of the 140-page document.
That's awesome. And what can LEAP scholars do to better posture themselves or position themselves to be recruited for translation events or other TPRs that we have?
So for the TPR process, between myself, I have UCOM and AFRICOM, another LDC has Southcom, and another one has INDOPACOM and CENTCOM. So basically, we look for that 2+2+ DLPT, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 12 E-Mentor score. That shows us as language division coordinator, LDCs, that you have the knowledge and able to fluently speak that language or whatever language it is. And then from there, it's all a matter of availability. If you're available for it, then, and if you have those skills and your commander allows you to go, then, like I said, if you're available, we select you. So, yep.
Awesome. And what are some TPRs that you're actively recruiting for right now?
So one of the major ones right now is we have a 2-person small Polish small boat exercise with the Navy. So again, as before, we can take requests from outside of the Air Force to any of the DoD components. Mm-hmm. So, and this one is actually in Poland. It's a travel TPR, multiple languages, BPACs here in the States, down at Herbert Field, INDOPACOM, Japanese, Laotian, you name it, we've got it going on as far as all over the world. So, yep.
Awesome. And Dr. Sankey, you mentioned that this was your first time using LEAP scholars for a translation project, but you've used them in other missions. Can you kind of tell us about your experience with recruiting or asking for the support and then utilizing the LEAP scholars?
Well, this has just been amazingly easy. When I've done regional studies trips, this is all done for me. The Air War College folks make the formal request in advance to get people to go with them. But for this particular translation exercise, your fearless leader, Mr. Ward, I floated this idea. He said, absolutely, and pointed me towards the request form. Luckily, my boss, Dr. Conversino, is a Russia expert who, of course, has been all over this. This is something that is of great personal interest to him. So he signed it gladly. And so this has just been the most painless bureaucratic process I've been involved with in the Air Force that has yielded these kind of returns. So, don't hesitate. And I've pushed some of our faculty and student scholars in this direction because there are things out there, whether it is foreign news or recordings of things, documents that are really useful to their research, but they maybe don't have the kind of facility to read Bulgarian or to really understand Chinese media. And here we have this amazing bench of people who can lend their not just language skills but cultural insight to all of this. So don't hesitate. Get the form, fill it out.
All right. Mr. Gunner, what are some of the largest TPRs you've recruited for?
So the one right off the top of my head was either it's Angola. It was for the French language, very large, huge document translation. I want to say it was 22 French scholars that was selected, probably about 40 or 50 that were recruited. And it was a huge, I forget the size of the document, but it was multiple documents. Had to sign team leaders. Team leaders had 4 or 5 people up underneath them. If I'm not mistaken, it was like 22 people that I selected for a French recruit translation for Angola.
Awesome. And when commanders or anybody in leadership, when they submit a request, they can tell you how many scholars they're looking for?
Yes. So they could actually say what rank structure they're needing. Again, if it's an NCO based TPR, i.e., we're doing one right now for Portuguese for the NCO Academy over in Ramstein. So for the translations, they wanted it to be more of a enlisted type thing from staff sergeant to senior master sergeant, so they could tell us that. And then by the size of the document, then they can say, hey, it may take 3 or 4, but me looking at the document and the experience I have now in selecting people, I can say, no, I'm recruiting 12, going to select, 10. So I could even out the work and not put so much strain on one person or a smaller group, so they can, 1, get the document translated as quick as possible, and 2, so we could have time just in case there is a mistake or someone needs to go back or whatever, they sent it in the wrong format, so that way we can have time to ensure that document, when it gets back to the sponsor, is exactly what they're looking for.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And Dr. Sankey, so you mentioned accessing some resources on the Resource Center's website. What are some more examples of those resources and who can access them?
Well, I don't want to speak for your resource website. This is probably one for Mr. Gunter. But certainly, anyone in the DAF, and it sounds like in the wider DoD, who understands that having customs and language resource and advisor is going to make their job better and easier. I've certainly heard great examples of people needing to write condolence or thank you notes to an international partner. All of these kind of things that show respect and that build these relationships can be even more value added when we bring in this terrific asset.
Awesome. All right. Let me see if we have any more questions. We have a comment here. Dr. Sankey and Mr. Gunner, you both do Air University great credit, and thank you for your visionary leadership and impact. That was from our language division chief.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any final questions before we sign off? Let me check here in our chat or on Facebook. All right. I think that is all of our questions. So before we sign off, we just want to say thank you so much to both of you Mr. Gunner and Dr. Sankey for joining us today, and just giving us a different perspective on the ZOV document translation, because it's been getting a lot of coverage in the media and a lot of people have really been interested in seeking this translation. So it's great to just hear the behind the scenes of how it happened and how you guys made it work. So thank you so much for joining us today and being able to explain that process to us.
Entirely well-deserved. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting it. This has been actually, this has been fun. I was nervous because this is my first one, but
Right.
this has been fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, see, it's not so bad. We were able to give people a lot of information that